Hello and welcome. I'm Dr. Adam Dorsay, a psychologist in Silicon Valley and the host of Super Psyched, a podcast dedicated to supercharging your life. Each episode contains fun, high-quality interviews with experts looking at psychology from all angles. Super Psyched is your tool to get more of what you want in your life and less of what you don't. Mindfulness is a word we often hear these days, and the best definition for mindfulness that I've heard is being aware of what's happening while it's happening. In the face of tech, from social media to AI and everything else competing for our attention, mindfulness may seem a bit of a challenge. What if there was a bridge between mindfulness and tech? Turns out there are many bridges, and of the people I know, there's no one more equipped than Jay Vidyarthi to talk about them. He's the author of a book I loved called Reclaim Your Mind: 7 Strategies to Enjoy Tech Mindfully. I'm not alone in my love for this book. Many thought leaders, including Super Psyched guest and Yale School of Management professor Emma Sapala, said, Jay is a tech insider and mindfulness expert intent on giving you back your freedom. I couldn't agree more. Listen in and learn new ways to stay grounded while you're in the cloud. Jay Vidyarthi, welcome to Super Psyched.
Thank you for having me. I'm so excited. I like your smile. Your smile is making it for me. I'm all ready.
I loved your book so much. I was smiling throughout listening. And I think this is, as one of your blurbs suggested, a book for the times. This is a book that is leaning into the beauty of mindfulness as well as the beauty of technology while representing both sides and seeing that both have a lot to offer and they are not necessarily at odds. You have lived deeply submerged, perhaps overly submerged in electronics at times, and yet you've also done silent meditation retreats for long periods of time. So you've really walked the talk. I forget how they say it. Walk the walk, walk the talk. You've done the thing. And I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about, let's start with the problem of each. Each of them presents a problem. Maybe some people might think, oh my gosh, I'm not being mindful enough. And some people who are being super mindful are being maybe too mindful at the absence of this wonderful tool called tech. What's the problem as you see it, first off?
Yeah, I think the problem is dissatisfaction no matter where you lie on that spectrum. I think what happens is that people get super into technology. This is the more common case in the modern era. They get so deep into technology, and we live in an attention economy where a lot of the technology is designed to distract us and polarize us. And so we end up kind of frazzled, right? We've got challenges paying attention. We're polarized politically. Our privacy is under threat, all kinds of not so great situations. But we start to lose track of what's really happening in the present moment. We start to lose track of who we are and the things that matter. But on the other end of the spectrum, unfortunately, a lot of my peers in the wellness and mindfulness world are kind of becoming like anti-technology, like, oh, technology is ruining everything. And there's a ton of guilt and shame and fear. Like, we're afraid of these big tech companies that are going to mess with us. And we feel guilty every time we pull out our phone, and we feel ashamed that we let our kids play video games. Like, oh, we can never let them play video games, right? And it's on both ends. I've experienced both ends. And at some point, I realized like there wasn't really a big problem with loving technology, and there is certainly not a problem with living mindfully. The challenge that I was facing was that I love technology and I want to live mindfully. And the world was giving me stories that that's not possible, that those two things are not true. And so I set out on a journey to see if that was really the case. And it's not. I absolutely now live a life where I love technology and engage with it. I set boundaries around problematic areas, but without the guilt and the shame. And I also live mindfully and go on retreats and practice mindfulness every day. So I think it's a false dichotomy, like many things in our society. It's being artificially polarized.
The word dichotomy and binary really work for me as it relates to this particular thought experiment around the inevitable coexistence of technology and mindfulness right now, and how so often people just want to pick a side. And you're saying we don't have to do that. It seems almost like takes an extra dose of creativity to accommodate the fact that we don't have to pick a side, that both things can be simultaneously true. There's an old Jewish joke where these two men are arguing and they realize that they're going to have to take it to the rabbi to get some form of resolution. And the rabbi hears them both out, strokes his beard and says, "You, sir, are correct." And he points at the other one and says, "You, sir, are also correct." And a woman overhears them and says, "They both can't be correct." And the rabbi says, "Well, you, ma'am, are also correct." And one of the things that I get from that joke is there is a multiplicity of truths. Let's see if we can co-formulate a question to help people determine their version of how tech and mindfulness can coexist well. What would be a question that a person could ask themselves so that they could accommodate both truths, that we can derive benefits from both sources?
I think it would be a pair of questions where the answer would obviously be yes to both. So one of the questions would be, are there tech habits in your life that are problematic? And it's like, obviously, yes.
Yes.
And then the next question would be like, are there times where technology brings you joy, meaning, purpose, or connection, or all of the above? And I think it's also an obvious yes. So right away, the idea that we're going to pick a side, and I think most people don't want to pick a side, but I think what happens online often is that like a voice will come up and they will be like, here are all the problems with technology, and they'll go all the way to the extreme until we're ready to like ban it and take it away from our kids and melt down on them for playing too many video games and feel bad, and then like try to get rid of our phone, but then realize we need to answer a few emails so we get our phone back and we feel guilty. And like we end up in all these spirals that are not necessary. In fact, let's just see very clearly, which is one of the pillars of mindfulness. Let's see very clearly what's happening here. There are some illusions that tech can serve us that can get us trapped into problematic loops where we're using too much to meet some deeper emotional need that the tech's never really going to fully satisfy. At the same time, if you go off on a mindfulness retreats and you kind of completely disconnect and you live on a totally analog lifestyle, you are sort of leaving the world behind. You're leaving a lot of connection and engagement with modern society and the way people interact with each other on the side of the road. And that's not necessarily the most satisfying way to be. So it's almost like the fear of missing out is kind of on both ends of the spectrum there. And I think those questions make it clear that you can kind of do both.
I love that. And FOMO is so deeply embedded in our psyches. It's one of the distractors I describe in my own book about connection that can really keep us from connecting with the present, is this notion of FOMO. Patrick McGinnis is the inventor of the term. He wrote a book called FOMO Sapiens. He was a guest on my podcast. Fabulous guy. And it seems like we can even experience it in this image of, and this is going to sound absolutely ridiculous, but I hope it makes sense to you, of the perception that even when we're with a group of meditators, we may wonder, how are we ranking? It's almost as if we are engaging in competitive meditation. Like, am I going as deep as the guy next to me? And I'm wondering, what are some of the things that block us from being more mindful, whether it's at a meditation retreat or in our daily existence?
So there's a kind of divide in our felt experience day to day between what you might call like direct awareness of what's really happening and our conceptual minds and our conceptual reality. And the most obvious example of our conceptual mind that we all can relate to is our thinking mind, right? We have all these thoughts, these verbalizations in our head, these abstract frameworks and logical explanations and abstractions of what's really happening. So a car drives by, all I saw was some color, but I already put a concept on it. It's a car because of the shape. And from there, I'm like, well, what kind of car is it? Oh, it's a nice car. I'm like, oh, who's that? Who's in my neighborhood with that nice car? This really just happened a second ago as I was talking, by the way. I'm just looking at it right now. Right. So there's all these levels of concept that sort of arise and layer on top of our experience. Now, technology is like an extension of our conceptual mind. So we're all connected in this like interconnected conceptual reality. It's kind of like in finance where people are trading derivatives of derivatives of derivatives. We're all like living in concepts about concepts about concepts about concepts. Like you pull out your phone and it's like so-and-so slammed so-and-so. And it's like you're kind of confronted with this emergency. It's a political emergency. Really what happened is like two old men said something to each other in a room in the other part of the country. And like, we're going to see how it plays out. But we have all of these layers of illusions. And so one of the things that blocks us is we get so captured by those illusions. And mindfulness for thousands of years has been teaching us this around our thoughts. But what I'm kind of realizing is it's true of technology too, is that we get so captured by these layers of conceptual illusion that we kind of left with like two easy options. One option is to just abandon awareness and go full on into conceptual reality and to just be living our concepts as if they are capital T truth. And that's not an ideal scenario.
Oh my God.
The other option is we start resisting. And anyone who's tried meditation for the first time knows what it's like when you just come back and you say, I can't meditate because these thoughts, they're just too frustrating because they're trying to stop thinking. But what a meditation teacher who's worth their salt will tell you is that the goal is not to stop thinking. The goal is to befriend your thoughts, to let them come and go, to not board every train of thought, especially not the problematic ones, but to accept them as a part of who you are. And all I'm doing now and all I'm doing in this book is saying the same thing about technology, which is some of the technology is problematic. Some of it can be challenging. Some of it can lead us to dark places. Some of it can polarize us. But technology itself is not the challenge here. The challenge is we're going too far in certain directions with it, that if we can actually befriend and heal our relationship with technology, we can use it to be the best technology it could possibly be. And we can slowly let go of all these problematic patterns.
And possibly even see these abstractions known as news, where if it bleeds, it leads. And we tend to think there's an assault on our sensory experience with all of these abstractions. This old man slammed this old man and the implications it's going to have on my life. And the fact is, with this 24-hour news cycle and even more through social media and the ongoing onslaught of data coming our way, the amygdala is responsible for our fear and anger. And it's just like it's constantly getting pinged, which doesn't allow our prefrontal cortex, our thinking, our planning mind that can be a little wiser at the time. It doesn't get much airtime. And one of the things that you're saying is that these two things could coexist, whereby there could be a gorgeous equilibrium where if we allow enough time for our brains, our higher brains, our prefrontal cortex, and the parts that allow the distance between the stimulus and the response to increase a little bit, we'll get time so that when we are viewing the onslaught of headlines, that we don't freak out.
Awareness creating space between stimulus and response, the way you pointed at there. I mean, first of all, the neuroscience of mindfulness is showing incredible evidence that this is a skill you can train. So what people have been saying for thousands of years that, you go and you meditate and something shifts in the way not only that you practice meditation, but also the way you show up in everyday life. Like that is starting to be corroborated by the neuroscience as well. Now, what's interesting is, so I go to these retreats and I start learning from these teachers and they start teaching me this and I start noticing it in my life. But I'm a tech lover. I grew up playing video games and like coding and designing. So at first I was like, oh, maybe there's something wrong with me. I shouldn't be using all this technology. But then I felt like, well, this is something I love and find a lot of joy in. So then I started applying mindfulness to my interactions with technology. And I've been doing that for 10, 15 years and trying to like evolve my relationship with technology. And specifically around news, but also a lot of other interfaces that we engage with on a daily basis. There's like one key principle around this that I've found to be like the guiding light, which is one of the strategies in the book, which is to reject false urgency. And the idea here is that for any information that technology is serving you, you can ask the question, is this being presented at a level of urgency that is accurate to its actual level of urgency? And that's true about, yes, a news headline. Is it so-and-so slammed so-and-so, or is it this person spoke to this person and they discussed this, which is actually what happened? Or is it being portrayed with false urgency? But you could ask the same thing about your text notifications. Like I'm getting a ding on my phone and it's like my wife who needs something for my son. That felt like an appropriate level of urgency. I'm getting dinged on my phone and it's like the meditation app I downloaded a week ago is sending me the same canned notification over and over again that I just ignore. I didn't need to be interrupted in that moment. And so like one of the things that I guide people through is like an audit of all of the different things that are pulling at your attention in your daily life. And you ask the question for each one, is this being presented at an appropriate level of urgency for the information it contains? And what results of that is a whole bunch of unsubscribes, a whole bunch of changes of settings, but also subscribing to channels that are actually generating real value for you, right? Like the news app Verity, which uses AI to analyze all the news out there. It always presents headlines in a very matter-of-fact way and separates out the spin from different elements in the media. It always presents the information at an appropriate level of urgency. So that's on my home screen now. So you end up changing your channels a little bit to represent accurate urgencies. I really want to point this out too, that came from mindfulness. It's not just like, here's a tip. It's like I was paying attention to the way my mind was interacting with these technologies. And over time, the insights were not just spiritual, psychological insights from my mind. They were insights about my technology. And that's the thing that we block when we just load this all up with guilt and shame and we demonize tech as bad. We block ourselves from being able to actually facilitate a healthy relationship with it.
I love that so much. And one thing I must comment on is the mere fact that you were able to look out the window in a very spontaneous and improvisational way and see a car and riff off of it. You, for the listener who doesn't know Jay, he is an accomplished musician, an improvisational musician who can also jam for hours. And I would think that somewhere between mindfulness and tech is this world of jamming musically in an improvisational way. And it helps foster a greater awareness for life and your ability to kind of, yes, and to use an improv term, what's going on outside your window while you and I are talking and you're nodding. So that leads me to this question. You've kind of answered it, but I want to get even more granular in terms of actionable tips. How can the listener use tech to feed mindfulness and mindfulness to feed tech?
Let's take those one at a time. So use tech to feed mindfulness. I'm sure everyone has tried a mindfulness app, but there's so much more depth in that category. So first of all, there are social media that are designed to foster compassion, like Talk Life and Therapy. So if someone's struggling out there, instead of a like button, there's a hug button. And if you go on there, you see people sharing very vulnerably about the situations they're facing in their lives, right? There's also like growing waves of, neurotech that's exploring like how to channel things like focused ultrasound and other areas to work with the brain. But if all that feels a little intense to you, I also think the basic layer of this is self-tracking. So as you probably know, there are features in your phone for screen time where you can measure how many minutes you spend on screen. Now, those features are worthless unless you're checking them. And one of the things that's interesting is that before those were features, it was actually a couple of like scrappy startups that were designing them. There was two I remember, Checky and Moment. Checky was Android, and it counted how many times you checked your phone, and Moment counted your screen time. You literally had to like take a screenshot of your settings screen and upload it to Moment. And then, the big tech companies absorbed them and made them part of their platforms. But all of this is pointless unless you're checking. And if you do check, what you'll find is the power of awareness naturally leads to change. So if you're a listener and you set a goal for this next week to really like check your screen time statistics each day and take 5 minutes to maybe journal or reflect on like, what did I spend my screen time on today? And you don't have to make any changes. You don't have to make any new plans or strategies. Just paying attention to it, you'll find your habits naturally start to change. So that's tech to support mindfulness. Mindfulness in the face of tech. Now, there's so much out there about this topic, right? Everyone and your mom is going to say, get your phone out of your bedroom, disable the notifications. Like that's something that people have already been talking about. But what's missing from that conversation is, to me, those are all ingredients in the pantry, but it's going to be up to you to cook. And the key recipe is self-awareness, right? So what I usually recommend to people as a first step, for 1 week, let go of any attempt to change anything about your relationship with technology, but see if you can set up a few reminders, like change your desktop background or whatever it might need, to remind you to be really aware of the cravings and urges that are resulting in you pulling out your devices, how it feels when you're interacting with specific technologies, and then how you feel after. Maybe you don't have a problem with your phone in your bedroom where someone else might, and maybe you actually get joy from checking your phone in the bedroom. That could be the case, right? I certainly get joy when I see that people liked my post. It almost feels like that's taboo to say.
Nobody's willing to admit, and yet everybody feels.
Well, let's admit it. Let's admit that there are parts of this that are joyful. I love watching TV shows. I think they're great. They're basically the digital campfire that me and my friends talk about. Stories have been a part of our species forever. I like to play video games. I like getting things done at work. But there's also things you'll notice that are problematic. Like when I just moved to a new area, I found myself using social media in a compulsive way because my friends weren't around, and it was actually becoming a problem that was demotivating me from going and getting connected with the local community in my new locale. And so when I identify that problem, like, okay, maybe I need to ease up on the social media right now. There was a time in my life where I couldn't stop checking my work email. And as I started to become more mindful, I realized, oh, there was something about my upbringing that made me feel like I am only valuable when I'm productive.
I can only relate to that 1,000,000%, but yes.
Yes, exactly. And so I'm like, oh, the reason I'm checking my email all day is not because Matt can't wait till 9 a.m. for me to reply to him. It's because I'm going around in my daily life and I feel worthless because I'm not being productive because that's how I was raised. I can ramble, but like, this is why everyone's confused, because Netflix is super fun.
So fun.
Meanwhile, I can't stop checking my email. But hopefully I've shown you, like, with awareness, we can start to like parse this apart and be like, oh, actually, I enjoy watching things and that's not a problem. The only problem there is I feel guilty about it because all these thought leaders online are telling me that TV is bad. Meanwhile, my work email, I really need to get off my phone because like I can't even focus on life. It's like diminishing my self-worth because I'm not productive 99.9% of the day.
Totally. It's interesting. You don't write this book from the perspective of a guy who's got it all figured out. I can tell that you're writing it from the perspective of a man who is in a fluid state of figuring it out and probably will, like most of us, die not having it all figured out. But where are you now, Jay Vidyarthi, relative to where were you previously with tech and mindfulness? Where are you now and where do you hope to be in the future?
Good question. As a kid, I was all in on tech. And like I would play video games till my eyes turned red. My 20s was kind of that time I was just talking about like productive, building a career in technology. Like we haven't talked about it, but I design technology for a living. You know, I work in project management software and email like remotely. And that was like my 20s. I really had to unpack a lot of that. And I'm still kind of working on that a little bit. As I've gotten older, where I am now around the time of writing this book is I've let go of the guilt and shame. I've built the habits. I've built the foundational skills. In that I would have what I describe as a secure relationship with technology, which is that I am like happy to enjoy technology when I enjoy it, happy to set boundaries and let go of the things that aren't serving me, and constantly practicing awareness around this stuff where having to make adjustments here and there. But where I want to go in the future is actually, it's an auspicious day that you're asking me because, you know, the book's just coming out. One of the experiments I'm doing, so I got advice from the publisher and from other people in the book world that like, okay, your book's coming out. You need to go like live on social media and put on a blazer with a stack of books and be like, hey, everybody, I've got a book coming out. Right? And I'm like, okay, this is problematic for me for a number of reasons. Not only the subject of the book, but also, you know, everything else. But what I decided and started actually today is I'm going to do an experiment of being, as my friend Tushin refers to it, extremely online for a month. But here's the rub. I'm going to try to do that in a way where I do not get into compulsive use patterns, problematic use patterns, hypervigilance around comments and notifications, self-conscious about how I'm coming across, all the patterns I struggled with in my early 20s that led me to back away from social media. And I think that's a clue to where I want to be in the future. Like I've unlearned a lot of the bad habits. I've found a secure relationship. And now there's like a little mischievous coyote energy in me that wants to like go back into this stuff with like almost like an invulnerability of like an anime character, like glowing with energy like Goku, and just like stepping into social media and enjoying it and spreading love and sharing compassionate replies to people. You know, this morning I saw a post. It was a beautiful little post and it had no replies. And I was kind of treating my morning as a kind of meditation on being extremely online. And I wrote this like long, detailed response to help that person just feel seen and to connect with that person. And the seeds I'm planting of a future where like, not only am I secure in my relationship with technology, it is actually becoming a tool for my practice, not simply in a guided meditation or tech that's designed for meditation, but like, can I go on X or LinkedIn or, you know, TikTok and be someone who actually shares awareness, who does not let these little design tricks command me? Can I show up as an empowered, like dare I say it, enlightened social media user. That's like, the next phase. But, who knows if it's possible? We'll see. But let me just say this. I believe if we're all moving in that direction, even 1%, the market will follow us.
I'm seeing a world as you're speaking where we can all engage in paying it forward, where we can all engage in a ripple effect of kindness, compassion, and positivity. I'm thinking IRL. I mean, one of the things I've done over the years, because it's authentically who I am, I probably never check out of a Walgreens or a grocery store without, having some witty banter that ideally leaves the cashier feeling better than they did before I entered. I'm not saying, oh, wow, I'm so good at this, but I really want to have an authentic connection. And only recently did I realize that, one of my subconscious hopes is that this is a person interfacing with the public, and maybe they'll pass it along to somebody who's having a bad day. And maybe that'll go somewhere. And what you're suggesting is an online presence where we all know that hiding behind keyboards can bring out some of the most sadistic and kind of shadowy behaviors that harm society based on projections of the person who's writing. It's almost like an ongoing Rorschach of awful that we see in these virtual worlds. And wouldn't it be nice to have more Jays running around saying, hey, I'm going to contribute to this jungle and ensure that the birds are singing so that they know that this is a safe place?
I think one of the big challenges with what's happening online that you're speaking about here is that because it's becoming a bit of a cesspool of negativity, a lot of the kind, wise, and loving people are opting out of technology.
Entirely.
And I think what you're speaking to is our need for the opposite to be the case. It takes a lot of bravery and courage, and I'm still working on that. So I don't know if we need a lot of Jays, but we need a lot of diverse people who are not afraid to show up online with presence, to show up online with kindness. And I don't know how we get there, but I know the first step. The first step is that secure relationship. I've gotten to base camp. If what you're describing is the peak of the mountain, I'm at base camp here. I've applied mindfulness to my love for technology, and I'm stable. I've got my tent set up. I'm looking up at the peak and I can see it, and I can see the ice fall. It looks really hard, but I see it up there. And I'm kind of saying, listen, we can at least come up to base camp here. And this is why I've been starting to think about it in an activist frame, because for thousands of years, there's been so many diverse traditions all over the world of contemplation and meditation. It's not exclusively a Buddhist thing at all. It's every major world tradition in some form or another has had some sect, if not a main sect, who's been looking at being present in the moment. Now, about 50 to 70 years ago, this lovely fellow, John Kabat-Zinn, introduced mindfulness-based stress reduction to a hospital in Massachusetts and basically introduced mindfulness as a secular practice into a system of society, which in the past 50 to 70 years, scientific basis has grown and mindfulness has spread to boardrooms and classrooms and hospital rooms. And it's on the cover of Time magazine. It's become a normal, secular, everyday thing in the West. What I'm predicting, the tumultuous conditions that we need to climb this mountain in around every single organization competing for our attention, is that mindfulness has now got a third role to play, especially for Generation Z and Generation Alpha, where it's almost an activist stance. If you take an 18-year-old and they sit and try to harness their capacity for attention in a world that is constantly trying to command their attention, that's not just spirituality or self-care anymore. It's spirituality, self-care, and activism. It's standing up for one's freedom of attention, one's right to choose in which direction they're going to point the flashlight of their mind, which is a choice that's being taken from us, quite frankly. And I think the way we take it back is not to hide.
An act of defiance to protect our birthrights. Our brains in their current form are estimated to be anywhere between 35,000 to 100,000 years old. And yet our outside realities have changed so dramatically that our brains that have been attuned to certain meteorological and topographical and sociological realities are not prepared for what is going on. And it seems that the mindfulness element is so crucial at this time. It's always been important, but more than ever to accommodate Moore's law, which basically dictates that Technology is doubling at, I think, every 30 months. I forget how quickly, but it's so fast. You actually in the book describe like a day in the life of a person who's trying to dance with tech and mindfulness. And I'm wondering, what would somebody be able to do perhaps every day to leverage technology as well as the ancient art of compassion in the tech sphere to just say, I'm putting out the seed with the hopes, like maybe what if every listener, what if every reader of your book, what if suddenly it caught on like wildfire to do something that would just through small acts of random acts of kindness in the virtual space, what would be your prescription?
So this is the part where someone who hasn't done the practice of mindfulness would throw out a tip. And this is where what I'm going to say is like right now, you, Adam, and all listeners, let's just go through a little bit of a thought experiment, thinking about your own life. So the first question is, what is a technology that you have maybe a challenging or problematic relationship with? So I'll give you a second, just think about that. In my experience, people can pretty quickly come up with a few examples. So what's an example of a technology? Once you have that in mind, now I want you to think about and reflect on, and maybe journal if you want. You can pause the audio and get a paper and pen if you want. Reflect on what are the deeper emotional needs that you are pursuing when you engage with this technology. So I'll give you some examples, right? Like let's say you play a lot of video games. Is it a need for connection because you play with your friends? Or is it a need for play, which you're not getting enough of in your life? Or is it a need for stimulation because you're bored? If it's work email, is it that need to feel productive? If it's social media, or maybe it's like a need for purpose, anything like that. So once you sort of brainstorm those emotional needs, right? You look back on those emotional needs and you start thinking about like, can you give me 2 to 3 examples of something you could do to more holistically address this emotional need in a lasting way? So like if it's a need for play, sure, video games are fine. It's a great way to get a certain kind of play, but there's other aspects of play that you don't get from video games. Are there some other ways you can fully address that need for play in your life? And what you'll end up with if you go through that experiment is you'll end up with a bunch of like, not just like, here's a tip, like get your phone out of your bedroom, disable your notifications. You'll get something that's addressing specifically like your heart, body, mind, and your unique needs that are calling you to be fooled by an illusion that technology is serving you. Like those emails were feeding me an illusion of productivity to help me ignore the fact that I actually had a deep wound that I actually needed to work on, that I was hiding behind the email. It seemed as innocuous as like, oh, Jay, you're just stuck on your work email. I was hiding behind my email from a very deep wound. I was protecting that part, to use the language of like internal family systems, right?
Oh,
protecting that part of me that just desperately wanted to feel productive. Otherwise, it was forced to confront the fact that I wasn't worth anything. And so, yeah, get your notifications or whatever. But like if you do an exercise like that and you really look into in a clear, penetrating way, what are the problematic technological loops that I'm in and why am I stuck in them? You are going to find the tips that actually are going to work and make a sizable difference in your life, not just something that like demands your willpower constantly to like, oh, I forgot I wasn't supposed to check my email after 5. You know, it's deeper than that.
Oh, that is so good. And for me, one of the things is I love watching streaming media because it gives me laughter and it gives me a chance to dream while I'm awake. And clearly, I probably need more organic versions of that. I did 2 years of improv, and anybody who's done improv knows that it's about the most fun you can have with your clothes on. It's just incredible. So I love that query of what is this a proxy for in my life that I need more of? And how might I be able to address that? And for those of you who've listened to various internal family systems teachers, including Dick Schwartz, who's the guy who created it, as well as Frank Anderson, who's right up there. What part of myself am I hoping to give some time to? And I love these questions that you're coming up with. And I really do agree with, again, one of the blurbs. This is a book for our time. One of the central tenets was a deep cut in the book that somebody might read and overlook, but it's basically, how do we not just live in the cloud and simultaneously be somehow earthbound as well, or I forget the exact way you articulated it, but it was like a perfect sentence.
I mean, I did write the book, so hopefully I should remember.
But when you write that many thousands of words, sometimes it's harder to recall the precise phrase. But
yeah, I think it was that it's okay to live with our heads in the cloud as long as we remember to stay grounded.
That was
and and I think your example, I want to pick up on that before we go. That example of dreaming and watching TV and then your experience with improv. I've done some improv too. It's so much fun. And it's like, in my experience, what you'll find as you take that query forward and say, oh, maybe I should do some improv and try to like explore that dreaming in a different way. Will you more deeply meet that emotional need in a way that like, wow, I didn't realize I needed that so much, even though the clue was right there in your TV watching habits the whole time. Not only will you realize that, but you'll also realize that TV is awesome. And that like you were stuck on TV because you were banging your head against the wall to get something it couldn't provide. But once you separate that out and you go get that, you won't watch in a compulsive, problematic way. You'll watch a healthy amount of TV and you'll love it again too. And that's like a key part. Like I titled the book Reclaim Your Mind because that's really what everybody needs right now. But it's also about reclaiming your technology too. Like a lot of entrenched systems and incentives are kind of twisting our technology, but technology is beautiful and fun when you can use it well. And that's what I want us to get back to as well. So I want you to like go do that improv and fully explore that dream. And then I want you to come back and watch TV and fully enjoy it without any guilt or shame that you're somehow placating some need. You're just enjoying TV for what it is.
And what you're speaking to right now is something that you alluded to, and that is attachment styles. So we're going to go there. I've been debating it internally, but attachment styles for the listener. You may have heard Dr. Stan Tatkin talking about attachment styles as they relate to our primary love relationships in the form of loosely anxious, avoidant, and secure. There are others that you mentioned appropriately, such as disorganized. And Dan Siegel, I have to just give him a nod of the head. He wrote the foreword. I mean, what a coveted individual to have write the foreword. One of my favorite people. He's one of the great neuroscientists who's really brought it to the fore in how it relates to psychotherapy. But let's talk for a second about attachment styles and their relationship with technology as you see it.
So these attachment styles are about relationships. And if you go online right now, you're going to hear a lot of people talk about addiction with technology. And I do believe there are a minority of people who we could consider addicted to technology in the same way that some might be addicted to a substance, like a truly problematic way. Now, our use of technology has certain hallmarks of addiction, like potential withdrawal symptoms and dopamine engagement, but that doesn't necessarily mean it's addiction. Personally, in like everyday life, the framing that has made the most sense for me and most of the people I work with on this, most everyday people, is to think of technology like a relationship. And that brings with it a lot of power as a metaphor. Certainly, you can be codependent on your technology. You need to set boundaries, but there's also a lot of joy and connection you get from your technology. And so it's sort of a metaphor that works. And if you take this to its logical extension and you look at the literature on attachment styles, you'll see the exact same pattern in the way different people relate to technology and the way we individually relate to different technologies. There are avoidant patterns, which would be someone who's like, technology is bad and it's evil, and they feel guilty every time they use it, and they judge you for using it, and they melt down on their kids for using it and just avoid it. It's just, they have some issue with technology, and like when they have to use it, they kind of sneak it.
It feels like a sin.
Yeah, it feels like a sin, right? But then you have the sort of like anxious or ambivalent relationship with technology. This is the person who's freaking out because their battery is running down, missing everything. I've got the FOMO. I can't live without it. And then you have the disorganized relationship, which is pretty common because, like I said earlier, all the mixed messages around this is pretty confusing. And so it's just kind of chaotic in your use. And some days you're using it all in, other ways you're not. It's stressing you out on both extremes. I've definitely been there before. But then what we've been talking about in this entire conversation is a secure relationship with technology. And so in attachment theory, that's what you're aiming for as a parent or aiming for in your romantic relationships, is to find that security. And so that's what we also need in our relationship with technology. And the example I give in the book is from an actual experience I had where someone commented after I did the thing I'm about to explain and pointed out like that it was very shocking. And I realized in that moment that we actually don't know what a secure relationship with technology looks like because none of us have it. I was in a social group and everyone's talking. We were at like some sort of event and I had this intense desire to look at my phone because the babysitter had our son. And I was like, I just really had this need to be like, is he okay? I haven't looked at my phone in a while. Does he need something? Did I forget to put my phone on sound? Like, is it on silent? But I'm in the middle of a conversation. And so I told everyone, I was just like, hey, everyone, I've just got a babysitter. I need to go look at my phone. I'll be right back. And I turned around, walked away, grabbed my phone, looked at it. There was no message, put it away, came back and rejoined the conversation. And someone came up to me after and was like, pointed out to me how shocking it was that I just said that and I walked away. And as I started to like unpack and reflect on it, I realized why I was starting to change in this way, because I personally have had the experience that many of you probably will recognize, which is I've certainly had the experience of just pulling my phone out in the middle of a group of people and just doing it and just ignoring everyone around me, which is not great. But I've also had the experience of like intentionally like preventing myself from doing what I need to do because I feel so socially trapped that I can't pull my phone out. And I feel so guilty and shameful about the idea. So I have to like kind of like not even paying attention to the conversation and maybe even like try to speed the conversation along. Neither of those are secure. One of them is avoidant, one of them is anxious, ambivalent. And I realized in that moment, like, oh, I was starting to actually achieve this goal of finding security in my relationship with my devices. And that's where the attachment style is a much more useful framing as a relationship than some like addictive toxin that's poisoning us or some enemy of the people or propaganda machine. It's really a relationship that we have with our devices. And yes, we need scientists to investigate it. We need design ethics in tech companies. We absolutely need regulators to look at this, but we are not powerless as individuals to make these changes in our own lives.
And it's so interesting how this experiment that you engaged in by stating your need, walking away and coming back mimics the mode of action that John Bowlby and Mary Ainsworth engaged in when they were actually studying attachment theory itself. So it was no different. It was tantamount to you saying, folks, a brother's got to pee. I'll be right back. And then you come back and the people were fine. And you very rightly state in your book that we are cyborgs now. And in some ways that was a recognition that, hey, listen, my son is an indelible part of me. And the closest tether I have to him is my phone. I'm compelled at this moment so that I can be more present to check in on him vis-a-vis my phone. And I'll be right back and we will be fine. And I love that so much. Just before I get to my final question here, Jay, what are some other tips that people might be able to actually put into play as it relates to either mindfulness or technology or the twain between the two?
I'll do a quick lightning round based on the strategies in the book. So one is, it's very important to pay close attention to the metaphorical illusions on your devices. So I would recommend people get very intentional about language. Like, is a friend really a friend? Is that conversation you're having via text or even with AI, is that really a conversation? Is the match that your dating app gives you, like, is that truly like a love match? You know, two people swiped on a picture. Similarly, like, is the like on your post because someone really deeply engaged with your post, or did they look at it for half a second, read the first 7 words, click like and move on? Is a view on your video that someone really watched your whole video, or did they just do it because they like you and they're your friend and they watched the first 7 seconds and they moved on, right? Like, so one tip is to pay really close attention to those illusory patterns. And then another tip I wanted to offer was about like authentic relationships. So there's a false dichotomy here. Certainly we need in-person relationships to feel okay, but that doesn't necessarily mean that you can't form authentic relationships online. So instead of like resisting every online connection, you might ask yourself, how do I make this digital relationship with someone more authentic? Maybe that's a voice note or a video message instead of a text. Maybe that's like, instead of a one-to-many social media, switching to DM and engaging directly with someone, right? So, and then I wanted to say one more thing too, which is around this topic of like attachment theory in a relationship. If you get in an argument and you start to go deep in like self-awareness, like I'm thinking about my relationship with my wife right now, as we got older and more mature, I got better at being like, instead of just, you know, losing my shit in the middle of a fight, being like, I'm really agitated right now. I'm just going to need a few minutes. Like, let's talk about this later. I think the exact same principle can be applied to like sending emails and messages and replying to comments and threads online, which is just take a second, right? Like someone says something that you disagree with, like let's just to use politically for an example. someone on your work chat says a politically charged statement that is like completely counter to your beliefs. It's so tempting to just reply and immediately be like, WTF are you talking about, right? And just like lay into them. But if you just take 1 minute, let alone 24 hours to just cool down and come back, you'll be like, wait a minute, this is a work forum, first of all. Second of all, people have different beliefs. Like, this is not the place for me to melt down. What is the right way to engage this person if I even want to engage with them, right? So in that same way, taking a pause, yes, in-person relationships are important, but there's an advantage about digital relationships, which is they're asynchronous. So if it is a charged conversation, you can take that pause and it not be awkward at all. So pros and cons. So those are some strategies that might help.
I love that so much, and the distance between the stimulus and the response. And you do talk a bit about Danny Kahneman's idea of system 1 versus system 2 thinking. And the system 1 thought is, what is 1 + 1 2? And if we use that quick mindset, that fast thinking for what is a slower problem could be a complex issue. Like, wow, there are multiple people in this forum. And if I say something, I could end up wrestling with a pig and both of us will get dirty and possibly fired or something else. So maybe I take a moment, maybe I engage in the Abraham Lincoln idea of taking a moment, perhaps even writing something out and just burning it for the sake of saying I've expressed that, and then finding a far more diplomatic way of engaging our wiser mind, engaging in that system 2, the slower thinking. So I love that so much. This book is essential. It's a required reading. And I'm so glad you put it out there. I'm so glad that you took some of your heartbeats and invested it into these pages. Phenomenal, phenomenal book.
Thank you.
Entirely true. Earlier, when you were talking about naming things accurately, being intentional in the wording you use, this is not an optional thing. This is so important. When we stop calling things what they are, everything becomes meaningless. And I'm going to paraphrase it horribly, but it was conveyed to me by Dr. Hugh Reidelhuber, a psychiatrist who's sadly no longer with us. But apparently Confucius said something akin to, all wisdom is derived from the accuracy in naming things. And the moment we stop naming things accurately, we have no foundation. This is not true. Calling somebody a friend who's not a friend, calling a conversation something that's not a conversation. Things have to be named with accuracy. And so I'm hoping that the lexicon increases, or that people find ways to really intentionally name things as they are, because once we stop naming things as they are, that's when things can really start going haywire, in my view.
Yeah. And the contrast to that is, I'm grateful to have Dan Siegel's support on this book. He's been an incredible inspiration. And he was the one who first taught me the idea of name it to tame it. And so when you apply that to your emotions, the opposite is true. When you name things accurately, it is incredible, the power of that. When you notice, in that argument with my wife that I was hypothetically describing, if I'm I'm feeling angry right now, you just say the fact of what's happening. The temperature goes down 50% just by naming it, right? And I'm teaching my son that right now. He's got a lot of big emotions. And when he names them, you can just immediately see that he's like, wait a minute, something is happening here. And now it has a name, right? So it's not only about getting rid of the illusory names around our technology. When we call a file on the computer a file, and a folder, and a desktop, those are metaphors that made sense. I mean, they were just mental tools to make this whole operating system a little easier to navigate. But somehow we just started getting all the way to calling friends, matches. And we kind of lost the plot at some point in the evolution of the interface metaphor concept that we need to reconnect with. And the AI conversation is so absolutely relevant. Is this a conversation? I'm literally talking to a large language learning model algorithm that's generating character by character and pretending to dialogue with me. This is not a conversation. This is a parasocial relationship. I could go on.
And I'm so glad that you could, and I know that you should. And in so many spaces, your voice is desperately needed. Name it to tame it, feel it to heal it. My entire first TEDx talk on men and emotions, the data men miss, is about this entire thing of name it to tame it. And that's one of the ways that, sadly, we've been conditioned not to know the names of our emotions. There's a condition within psychology called alexithymia, the inability to put words to our emotions. And that can cause profound interference. And in fact, you and I were both socialized to be alexithymic because, insert misogynistic or homophobic term here, and that's what we'd be called if we actually named our feelings when we were boys. We were told feelings are unacceptable, and we became quite estranged from them throughout our lives. So one of the things I love about connecting with you is there's just so much vitality. I mean, here you are all the way in Northern Ontario in beautiful, lovely, magical winterland, connecting with me over Zoom in here in relatively balmy 50-degree Fahrenheit, California. I know you Celsius. But all I can tell you is, Jay, oh my gosh, this is not euphemistic. And no, this is not overblown. I have loved spending time with you. Is there anything I should have asked before that I haven't yet asked?
I don't think so. I really appreciate our time together. This is great. You didn't ask about my cats, which I'm heard about. No, I'm just kidding.
Well, I've got a cat on my lap during the recording of this video. Tell me about your cats.
Well, we got a new cat. So my son loved our little cat that we've had for a while, but she just hid from him all the time. So we got a cat that he could actually kind of play with. And now he's like manhandling her and chasing her around the house all the time. But she's teaching him boundaries because like he's very verbal and he's always pushing buttons like a little boy should do, which is funny about parenting because for the first time ever, I experienced two emotions at the same time. Like when my son challenges me, I'm like simultaneously proud of him. Like I'm like, don't let the dictator of your life tell you what to do. But also go to your room.
Yeah, but also recognizing that there's been a boundary that's been crossed. Emotions are social things. They tend to coexist. There tend to be a multiplicity of emotions. And that's another thing that was part of our birthright that we were taught not to experience. You know, one of the things that's amazing about pets and children is they are midwives to our emotional experience. And here you are being a role model to your son, showing him how to actually name it to tame it, how to actually engage with both technology and mindfulness. What a lucky boy.
What's interesting about this example is Rumi, the cat. Her name's Raru. He named her Raru. I don't know where he got it from. And
like Rumi, the Sufi poet?
I've been calling her Rumi because it's hard to say Raru sometimes.
Raru.
But anyway, what's interesting about Animal World, I sent you a picture this morning of me walking in the snowy forest up here in Canada. What's interesting about that is like a lot of people like want to get out to nature, which I talk about in my book, that like we're really trying to get away from human nature. And the reason I brought up that story about the cat was that she just kind of scratches him when he pushes it too far. And in a way, I see that as really healthy for him because everyone else in his life, when he crosses a boundary, like we get into this whole conversation about feelings. And sometimes you just need a cat to scratch you. You can't argue. You can't like debate about where the boundary is and say, well, no, I didn't do that. You did that. You pushed the cat. She scratched you. And I've been talking to him a little bit about it. And it's been really good for him to understand boundaries because there's something wise in the non-conceptual reality of the natural world that a lot of us seek and need to spend more time in to counter the human nature that has expanded on the collective internet and therefore expanded the number of seconds we spend in a day in conceptual abstraction versus just getting scratched by a cat or cold out in the winter forest, right?
A recognition that there are natural boundaries that are not manipulatable because so much can be manipulated in these virtual spaces and between humans. As we know, you don't have to watch Game of Thrones to know that there is a lot of that can go on. Jay, my final question to you, my good man, is this. If you had the magical powers to confer upon all humanity one insight or skill that would dramatically improve the lives of the individual, and perhaps since we are all connected, society at large, what would that skill or insight be? And how do you imagine it would impact the individual as well as perhaps society at large?
Now, is it a skill or a superpower?
You have the superpower to confer upon all humanity that skill or insight. What would the skill or insight be?
I think it would be being able to immediately ground into one's moment-to-moment sense experience in a way that elucidates like insights about oneself and the world. Like to see clearly is what I'm really talking about. For everyone to have the skill to see things as they actually are. I'm still working on it. The ability to really see through that abstraction layer, I think would dramatically influence the way we approach our technology, yes, but our relationships, our life, and everything beyond. So that's it. I think clarity would be the skill.
Jay, sold. This has been a blast. Thank you so much for sharing your wisdom and your time with my listeners.
Thanks for having me. This was so much fun, and I appreciate the detailed questions. Clearly, you actually read the book, which I appreciate.
I actually read the book and loved the book. It felt like I was traveling with a friend.
Oh, that's great. Well, we made some new friendships today, I think.
I would like to think so, and I hope we named that accurately.
Only time will tell.
This is Dr. Adam Dorsay thanking you for listening to Super Psyched. If you know anyone who might like it or who might benefit from listening, share it. And if you like the episode, please hit subscribe